says that when he arrested Clay Shaw, the very first person that Clay Shaw called was Fred Lee Crisman, meaning to Jim Garrison that Crisman was probably...
I welcome this kind of examination.
You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
That's why I don't read the newspaper. I'm a man. I'm 40.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency.
As of now, I am in control here in the White House.
This is crack cocaine from the White House. It could easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy.
Good evening. This is Mae Bressel in Carmel, California.
Anybody who's not willing to change based on what they learned is ignorant.
Coffee's for closers only.
I think we've given you enough.
On to Chicago and let's win there.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
This is the Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hi, this is Ken Thomas. You are listening to Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hello, America and the world. Welcome to the Midnight Rider News Show. I'm S.T. Patrick, your friendly neighborhood host, traipsing and traversing through the trials and travails that have so tempestuously and untruthfully been blasted into your eyes, ears, and minds by the state-sponsored talking heads, the court historians, and the textbook conglomerates that control information today. Tonight we have episode 132, Adam Gorightly on Fred Crisman, Kerry Thornley, Gordon Novell, and parapolitical research. He'll join us next in the midnight hour. Now, a short cleaning of the castle this evening. I've been working very hard at finalizing issue 3 of Garrison, which will be released in, I'm going to guess, about a week. And for all future listeners, that's the end of October 2019. Now, all of our social media links are at midnightridernews.com, and you can get in contact with us there as well. Now, this third issue is large, and by large, I mean 252 pages. But I think it's large in a good way. You know, I think it's going to top out at, as I said, over 252 pages, but it has very few ads, which is, I think, a good thing. It's kind of like more of the size of a scholarly journal than a magazine. So I'm excited about the work that's been done by all the writers. I really think they did an amazing job once again. So really, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Adam Gorightly.
Roswell, Area 51 and Bob Lazar, MJ-12, JFK, Art Bell, 9/11, Disclosure, and what's really happening on the moon. The great John Lear joined us to talk about all of this and more.
Hi, this is John Lear. If you want to know how my experiences took me to the alternative side of history and how they both landed me in the middle of the Bob Lazar story, download episode 11 of the Midnight Rider News Show.
Our guest tonight, Adam Gorightly, is the author of many books. This one from 2018. It's called A is for Adamski. Here's a little preview.
Here we've seen something. I've seen something. Hundreds of pilots have seen something.
We're dealing with a type of man that is almost as far above us in intelligence as we are above the lower animals.
I want to tell you, too, that I do have a couple of doubts in my mind. We all see these newspaper reports.
9 disc-like objects, roughly 45 miles away, flying at a speed of approximately 1,500 miles per hour.
Let everyone realize when they call to their mighty I am present, the greatest power, in fact, all the powers of the universe.
That's how people got here. They placed a colony on the planet. That was 86,000 years ago.
If they're here, they're only here with one purpose, and that is to observe us. We have to have 15 million witnesses before anybody's going to look into the problem seriously? Why, this is utterly fantastic. This is more fantastic than flying saucers or people from Venus or anything as far as I'm concerned.
That's A is for Adamski, and it's been described as the ultimate resource for early UFO contactees. So if you're interested in that, that is a great book to pick up. Now, the reference in the title is to George Adamski, and as you'll hear tonight, Adam is widely versed in the conspiratorial and the parapolitical, and he'll address that right away. Now, he's the author of Historia Discordia, Caught in the Crossfire, Kerry, Thornley, Oswald, and the Garrison Investigation, Happy Trails to High Weirdness, A Who's Who of the Manson Family, The Shadow over Santa Susana, Black Magic, Mind Control, and the Manson Family Mythos, James Shelby Downard's Mystical War, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, and many other books, magazine articles, blog posts, zine entries, and, of course, talk show appearances like ours. Now, he can be found at adamgorightly.com, historiadiscordia.com, and those are just two of the places, actually. He'll tell us more later in the show. But here he is right now. This is Adam Gorightly. Hello, Adam. How are you this evening?
Great, ST. Thanks for having me on.
Well, as the listeners to the Midnight Rider News Show know, I have a great admiration for those who have paved this path so that we can do what we do today, both on the show and in the magazine Garrison. Now, you are indeed one of those guys,
well, thank you.
But I know that you grew up like I did, a product of American schools that taught history the way it's routinely taught, and you took quite a different path at a pretty young age. When do you first remember thinking that history and current events and all these things are being taught the way that they're still taught, and that was mythology, that you're really being taught in essence the wrong way? What were your early catalysts for that sort of massive change in thinking?
I get asked that question quite a bit, and I usually share a couple anecdotes. One was I had a psychedelic acid trip where I saw some UFOs with a friend. And so that was a powerful experience, and that got me questioning, quote unquote, consensus reality. And that was like, I was how old was I then? 17, pushing 18, and so I grew up in that period where I was kind of into in search of some of the television shows, then looking at paranormal stuff, and also I think one of the things, a light bulb went off in my head, such as it is, was this was probably around 84, where I was on a junior college campus in Central California, and I saw a poster, and it asked the question, did the CIA kill JFK? And I went, whoa, I never heard about that before. That's intriguing. And I got pretty deep into JFK assassination research, during that period in the early to mid 80s. And so that's what kind of launched me on the this path. Those two incidents, probably a lot of other things. Yeah.
Right. I think there's always this progression for people in this field. One thing just hits you really hard in the beginning, and for many that's the JFK assassination. But then when you start to sort of question these stories the way they're taught, you start looking at everything that way. And of course, then you're down that long road that we're down. So about a year ago, we had a gentleman on the show that we had Ken Thomas on the show.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yes, and we talked about the Maury Island incident some, and one thing that you and Ken do so well is that you really mix the conspiratorial with the parapolitical, and you both do it so seamlessly, almost like you can't have one without the other. You can't have the conspiratorial without the parapolitical, and vice versa. And I like that, but I've noticed that many of the conspiratorial researchers are, I would say, very nervous about approaching anything in the parapolitical publicly. And I've had many talks with them privately. They're all very interesting. And many of them are actually interested in the parapolitical. They just don't want to touch those issues publicly in a case that it sort of mars their, quote, serious research, unquote. So I think parapolitics remains to them this sort of bastard child of conspiracy. But then, those who are vastly more interested in the parapolitical or the straight up paranormal are also strong believers that the para issues lead the conspiratorial ones, that the para is really sort of pulling the cart of the conspiratorial, so to speak. And so it's an interesting time when the two groups sort of connect and sort of talk around one another. But that's long been disconcerting to me, and we're trying to merge both in the magazine. But Why do you think that strife is there?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like comparison to that is UFO people who don't want to talk about Bigfoot, because they think it's below them, or it's not a serious subject, where a lot of people can say the same thing about ufologists. So you asked me why do people not like to mix paranormal and conspiracies? Well, you see a lot more intermingling of that, but it's like a nut and bolts ufologist, for instance. They don't want to deal with these incidents of Bigfoot showing up on UFO scenes or UFO cases that come across more as like ghosts or these type of things showing up, and maybe hardcore conspiracy researchers, say, or JFK assassination researchers delving deeply into the different facts surrounding the case. They want to, be seen as legitimate researchers, and paranormal, of course, is seen as a more woo-woo type of affair.
Yes, right. And, that Maury Island incident, that Maury Island case is really a good example of this merger between the conspiratorial and the parapolitical. There are definite ties between the Maury Island incident off the coast of Washington State and the JFK assassination.
Of course, yeah.
Huge cast of characters. So can you tell us first about really discovering that those links existed? And for those who may not know, how about a little bit about Maury Island incident at large?
Before I launch into that, Ken's a good friend, and part of that, the zine scene in the late 80s, it was like a lot of confluences coming together, people who are into this stuff like UFOs and conspiracies and psychedelics and these type of things, and those are the kind of people that gravitated together, because there wasn't really a forum for the freaks back then as there is now, as things have evolved with social media. And part of that, it's not only mixing conspiracies with the paranormal, but it's also a larger pop culture thing, I think, that both Ken and I look at, and how these different threads sometimes work their way into each other. With so you want to go into Maury Island, huh?
Well, yes, absolutely. And not only do I think it's a fascinating story with a lot of characters, but it's going to sort of lead us into the Fred Crisman story, which I think is interesting as well.
Well, sort of. I have it's on my Historia Discordia site, and I have a webmaster there who's kind enough to do a lot of the web work, putting up the posts. He's actually a publisher as well. From Groucho Gandhi goes by. Fiji Books is his publishing house. Anyway, I'll send him stuff, and when he gets around to it, he'll post articles. And it'd been nice if that would have stayed up. I posted it this morning, then I was going through it and making sure everything was cool. Noticed like 3 paragraphs were missing from the middle, and this is going to make absolute no sense to anybody, So hopefully I'll have that back up in a day or two, and I can share that with you. And maybe when you post this episode, you can post that link. But yeah, I've been looking into Crisman for a while. How long ago was it now? A year ago? Myself and Greg Bishop published a book on the UFO contactees, old school contactees from back in the day, called A is for Adamski, The Golden Age of the UFO Contactees, and cover Crisman a bit in the book. And I've also been writing a series of posts on a guy named Raymond Shears, who figures into the Garrison investigation, and there was some supposed connections between Shears and Crisman and Crisman's oddball associate Thomas Edward Beckham. And so, yeah, I was pulling on a lot of those threads, but the Maury Island case itself, boy, that happened supposedly just a few days before the famous Kenneth Arnold case over Mount Rainier. So Kenneth Arnold case, that was like June, I forget the exact date, and maybe June 23rd kind of rings a bell, somewhere in that area of 1947. And Crisman and his buddy Harold Dahl claimed they had actual UFO encounter 3 days before that. Of course, he didn't talk about this till a few months after the fact, after Kenneth Arnold's sightings became a big deal, and he contacted Ray Palmer of, let's see, it was Amazing Stories magazine, I think, at that time, claiming that he had some material from a flying saucer, and similar to, more recently you hear stuff about arts parts and metamaterials from TTSA. Well, supposedly he had some of that, they were calling it slag, and he wanted, it seemed like maybe, I think now, looking at retrospect, he was pulling a scam, but he wanted to sell this story and maybe sell some of that material. And so that's how the story kind of got started, and he got a hold of Ray Palmer there, and Ray Palmer had published Kenneth Arnold's story of his sighting. Kenneth Arnold kind of became a pseudo-investigator and went out there to Maury Island to investigate the case, and it just got progressively stranger from there. Backing up a little bit, about a year before that, Crisman had contacted Ray Palmer. Of course, Ray Palmer published a lot of the articles by Richard Shaver on the Diros, those underground creatures that were like in an ongoing battle with humankind. And Crisman claimed that he had also battled some Diros in an underground cavern during World War II, and at that time he was also claiming that he knew where some Diro machinery was, and it was like another kind of scam I think he was trying to pull on Ray Palmer, the publisher there, and Palmer never really bit, but he did bite enough on the story of a Maury Island sighting that he sent Kenneth Arnold out there to check that out. And kind of the long and short of it, I feel it was pretty much a scam that Crisman was trying to pull. If you look at a lot of the details of the story, the claim was that his buddy Harold Dahl and he ran a kind of a timber salvage thing, and they had a little boat, and they'd go out and salvage timber that was left over, from some of the big logging sales, the stuff that the big companies didn't take. So they were salvaging, that was their story. And Dahl claimed that he saw several donut-shaped ships, and one of them started laboring and sent out all this slag or this material that landed on his boat, kind of half destroyed his boat, burnt his son's arm, killed their dog. And there was different variations of the story. Some of them were that there were several people on the boat, and it kind of varied, and the accounts were changing. And anyway, when Arnold got out there, a lot of weird crap started happening. As soon as he showed up, and this was in Tacoma, where he was meeting to interview Crisman and Dahl. When he first got there in town, he was looking all around for a room and couldn't find anything. Everything was booked up. There probably wasn't that many hotels in there at the time, and the last place he tried was the most expensive one in town, and because he was trying to do this inexpensively, and the front desk guy there informed him, we already have a room for you. He said, "You sure it's the same Kenneth Arnold?" "Yeah, you're from," and they said I think Arnold was from, where was he from? Might have been Boise, Idaho. And "Yeah, you're Mr. Arnold from Boise." And so, okay, well, that was kind of weird. And so he used that hotel room over the next few days to interview these guys, and they shared that story with them. But also reporters were on top of the story and knew all about their conversations, and Arnold was beginning to think the room was bugged because all of this was getting out, and he was trying to keep it on the download. What I expect really happened was that Crisman and Dahl were leaking details of this story to the press, to further promote their story about this incident. There was other stuff. Dahl said he was visited by a man in black who warned him to keep quiet or we're going to take you out, pal. So he supposedly split, left all of a sudden, and Arnold had a couple of friends on Project Blue Book he brought in, and the Air Force had just become the Air Force during that period. They came, interviewed Crisman and Dahl, and they suspected it was a hoax as well. They did take some of the material back, the slag that was supposedly from a saucer. They left the next day. They weren't too impressed. At least that was the account, but they left with some of the slag in it. Taking off there from Tacoma, the B-52 they were in crashed. both of the two investigators died, although the rest of the crew were able to parachute out or whatever. And so that was actually the first crash of an Air Force plane of any type, because they just formed the Air Force during that period. So it was kind of a big deal. But the weird fucking thing about it was the newspaper came out the next day, and the story, it was kind of like a sensational headline that it was due, because they had the remains of a supposed saucer material that, and there was inferences that the B-52 had been shot down or something to that effect, like there was something hinky going on with that part of the story. But once again, it was like it was funny that the press was leaking details about material from a saucer crash might have been behind this crash of the B-52. So a lot of weirdness surrounding the whole story, and that's basically the first part of the story, and I don't know how deep you want to get into that.
Well, if I remember correctly from the show with Ken, Guy Bannister ends up bizarrely showing up in Washington around the Maury Island incident.
Well, Ken writes about that in his book, and I don't know, the story with Bannister, and I'm trying to remember where he was located. I think it was somewhere there in the Northwest at that time.
I think Bannister was working out of the FBI office in Chicago at the time of Maury Island, I think. But we can move on to delving deeper into Crisman, actually. There was at one time a lot of talk that he might be one of the three tramps or hobos, or intelligence men or whatever they were. And as John Barber said in the show intro tonight, Jim Garrison was very interested in what ties Crisman may or may not have had to Clay Shaw. And I believe he once said that there was a television show based upon him or something like that as well. Just a lot of oddities in this man's life. That's a fascinating biography there. And he's not the only one. So if you could, let's just go deeper into who Fred Crisman was.
Sure. I was going to say with the Bannister thing, it was kind of weird because what the report was of what he found was a little miniature disc. And, I mean, it was just small, like probably the size of a Frisbee, some kind of seemingly mechanical thing, but it wasn't in operation. That's the gist of the story. Ken, like a lot of us, connects the dots sometimes. I don't know if he's really connected to Maury Island and all. Is just kind of a little oddity connected to Bannister. But anyway, so Crisman, story on him, basically, he served in... He did serve, let's see, during World War II. He was originally from that Tacoma, that area, and served in the war, and also Korean War as well later on for a little bit. But and he was a bomber pilot. And reading through some of the material I found on him, and a lot of this comes from guys who did the research back in the day were Larry Hancock, who you probably know, and also Tom Adams, who's I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name in ufology. He one of the foremost cattle mutilation researchers back in the day, and really got into looking at the helicopter mystery associated with mutilations and also UFO sightings. So anyway, a lot of the material, FOI material on Crisman was through Tom Adams back in the day, as well as Larry Hancock. But Crisman, had served as a pilot, and apparently he suffered from PTSD pretty bad, and at one point kind of developed a problem with painkillers, which went on throughout his life. So he had that little episode where he kind of got taken off his command and was dealing with some psychological issues, just by serving in the war like a lot of people do. And he ended up there back in Tacoma and spent a lot of his time as a teacher, a school administrator. He also had some time with Boeing. And a lot of people point to Boeing, that, maybe there was something there going on with Boeing and the military-industrial complex, and that those kind of angles worked themselves into some of the conspiracy literature surrounding JFK, and as well the Garrison investigation. The things I picked out that were interesting was he did have some episodes there, ongoing problems with law enforcement. In 1958, he got picked up for drunk driving and unregistered concealed weapon, and they discovered he was on barbiturates at that time. And so he started having these brush-ups with the law and disorderly conduct and these type of things. And that led to, he was a school administrator at that time. That was like 1957 or so, and he lost his job, and it looks like he got into he kind of made a comeback on the UFO scene, so he was still involved with a lot of the players in ufology, so he he was a renaissance man of a lot of weird stuff. But some of the weird stuff I discovered in the 60s, of course, we should probably talk a little bit about the three tramps thing. It was alleged that he was one of the three tramps picked up in Dealey Plaza in the aftermath of the assassination. Of course, there was a lot of different theories surrounding the three tramps, who they were, and Garrison looked at a lot of that, and he got a lot of leads, probably all of them ultimately bogus in my opinion, but the one that really stuck the most was Crisman as perhaps the old man tramp, because when they got to the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation, a lot of this material got, fed to that the House Select Committee, and they looked at the three tramps, and this information was passed on to Garrison. Some of researchers Garrison looked at, they passed on 6 or 7 names to look at, and they went through the list, and none of them really looked like any of the tramps, and they had alibis. But the one who most, I think they latched on to Crisman, because at that time he most resembled, out of all these possible suspects, he most resembled the old man tramp. And ultimately, there was he had pretty strong alibi. There was 3 teachers that saw him teaching there in, where was that? He was in Oregon, I think, at that time. So had a pretty strong alibi, and I don't think he was one of the tramps. So we can get back to the Garrison investigation just a bit. So that was obviously that was 63. And then 64, he got a job instructing in, I think it was Mount Rainier. And this is the oddity I cover in this latest piece. He got fired from that job a couple of years later because he was basically put together a little secret society, I guess you could call it, of students there at this high school. And he was basically fired for, it was considered unauthorized, inappropriate contacts he was having with the students by forming this little group, It's like, well, what the heck was that? I don't know exactly. He was alleged to be a pretty far out right winger. Was it something along those lines, some little militia or something similar to what David Ferry had? Another angle I was looking at with a couple investigators, researchers named Kirk Nelson and Jeff Sulak, was this connection with Crisman to something called the Servants of Awareness that came up during the Garrison investigation. And you might have heard me talk to Rob about this. Yeah, so the first, I think most recently, Joan Mellon in her book mentioned that there was some connection between Crisman and a group called Servants of Awareness, and they were involved in a drug trafficking ring, or at least the Olympia Police Department was looking into that. She mentioned that in her book, but there was really no. She's pretty good at giving sources sometimes. Maybe not always that great of sources, but there was really no source for this. But turns out, I figured out she got it from a 1975 Crawdaddy magazine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Crawdaddy. Yeah, and that was Paul Williams published that, did a lot of great work. He was originally with Rolling Stone, and moved on to publish Crawdaddy, and they had a reoccurring section of that called Crawdoodad, where they look at conspiracies and politics. And anyway, that's where that allegation came from, and it was attributed to the Assassination Investigation Bureau, which was started by Carl Ogleby back in the day. And they were active for a few years, but anyway, that group helped really petition Congress to start the House Select Committee on Investigations. But anyway, where did this information come from? Where did Carl Ogleby and his group get? And I think it circles back once again to Garrison and a couple of the investigators that were looking into Crisman. And really, besides that, the only mention in the Garrison materials, he's asked about service awareness. There was a transcription error. It was actually the Servants of Awareness. They asked him if he knew about this group, and he said he had no clue about them, He'd heard of them, but he didn't have any involvement. And so that's where we go down another rabbit hole. I'll try to make this as quick as possible, because it kind of is a rabbit hole, and it doesn't necessarily go anywhere, but it's kind of odd. This and it does once again connect to possible CIA connections and possible grander conspiracy, maybe MK Ultra stuff. But this group, Servants of Awareness, I discovered. I was looking around, and they were kind of an offshoot of a group or a church in Seattle called the Center of Integration that was kind of started in the early 50s. And around 57 or 58, they learned that they could get LSD direct from Sandoz Laboratories. All they had to do was fill out some paperwork. They were recognized as a church. And so this group ended up getting the LSD, and they started using it for their channeling sessions. They were already involved in channeling. They were kind of like an Edgar Casey group. Their main leader, he'd go into a channeled state, and he'd help people with, cures for sicknesses or kind of psychological counseling. So this group started using that, and this group, also the Center for Integration, kind of had a connection to Captain Al Hubbard, if you know that name, because Hubbard had a deal going on in, I think it was Ontario at that time, with it was called the Hollywood Medical Facility, and they were doing some of the early U.S. LSD testing, and Hubbard had all these supposed connections with initially the OSS that became the Central Intelligence Agency. So all these odd connections, and the Center of Integration, a lot of things thrown at you, they kind of splintered. And in the 60s, one part of it became a group called first the Organization of Awareness, that in 67 became the Servants of Awareness, and they were still using LSD at this time, channeling entities, channeling quote-unquote what they called awareness that has been depicted as kind of like an ET type ascended master fellow. So that's kind of the story to that point, who the Servants of Awareness were, and they were in that Olympia, Tacoma area the same time Fred Crisman was, and in their literature they came out with an anniversary issue, I think like 10 years later, and the guy who was channeling for the group then, as they were known as, by this time they were known as Cosmic Awareness Communications, and they're still around. The guy's lead channeler was named Shockley, and he was claiming that some of the original channelers, a guy named Frank Doobie, that the group had originally been funded by the CIA. It's unclear, it doesn't say really much more except for that allegation. And of course I flashed on Crisman. Was it perhaps Crisman who was a conduit? I kind of doubt it, but it's all just, it's one of those mysteries you kind of dive into, and by the time you get to a certain point, you end up with more questions than answers. And so there's, I don't know, maybe there'll be more to come of that. One thing I should mention, in Crisman's book that he wrote under the name of John Gold, of course, he was kind of a right-wing figure, had a radio show there in Tacoma, was battling city government during this period, 67 to 70, and in that book he depicts this battle of his group of kind of right-wing guys trying to clean up the city against the liberal socialistic menace. And there's an episode in there where a friend of his by the name of Marshall Reconnaissado, who is the father of Michael Reconnaissado, who's connected to the octopus, which Ken Thomas and Jim Keith wrote about. That's another rabbit hole. Michael Reconnaissado said that Crisman was some kind of it's like a prodigy to him. But anyway, his father, Marshall Reconnaissado, operated a public relations firm, and Crisman worked for him sometimes. They seemed like part of what they were up to. They were political operatives, but Crisman also said that Reconnaissado had different fly-by-night businesses, it sounded like, and one he bought a pharmaceutical firm, and he renamed it Drug Sales West, and he had some of the lab equipment after he purchased this outfit. He wasn't using it, and that equipment got mothballed and it was ripped off, and Crisman in the book intimates that it was his enemies in the government. He talks about a vast conspiracy with the city government, the local newspaper, the like even the Better Business Bureau were all against him and Reconnaissado and his friends, and that they stole the lab equipment. And that lab equipment turned up, he said, short time afterwards, and the time frame is, it's like we're looking at 68, 69. He's really not clear on that. And he says it resulted that where this equipment was, it became the biggest raid of the biggest haul of LSD on the West Coast at that time. And I haven't been really able to validate that at all. And so anyway, he says ultimately the story they tried to pin it on him and his friends, but then the story, they figured out, Crisman and his buddies figured out what they were up to, and the story kind of just went away. And so, that's another connection with, an LSD. Crisman might have been trying to muddy the waters of what was really going on in that instance, and he might have, who knows, he might have been involved in some type of drug ring with the Servants of Awareness. Hard to say. The claim, once again, that Joan Mellon repeats is that the Olympia PD was investigating this drug ring, and obviously no charges were ever filed. And one of the guys who's kind of been looking into this has filed a FOIA request with the town of Olympia, I believe, or the Olympia PD. So maybe we'll end up learning more. But you can, if you want to read about this, look for the next post at A Story Discordia, where I get into this, and post post is called Fred Crisman and the Servants of Awareness.
Well, we will definitely make sure that link is available in the show notes, so everybody check that out, please. Now, Fred Crisman, November 22nd, 1963, does he have an alibi for that day? And I guess what I really should have asked you was, does he have an alibi that's believable? Is there any reason to doubt him?
Oh, he has an alibi. I actually posted the document that was his alibi. I can read it to you. You'll see it in the article. It came from Stanley W. Peerboom, who was the principal at Rainier High School. And he was replying to the House Select Committee on Assassinations to their deputy counsel. This was December 5th, 1978. And, Dear Sir, the letter is to attest to the fact that I was a member of the teaching staff at Rainier Union High School during the 1963-64 school year, and that Fred Lee Crisman was also a member of the teaching staff that year. I can also verify that on the day of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, I was teaching at the school, and Fred Lee Crisman was also teaching at the school on that day. Yours truly, blah, blah, blah. Then there was also two other witnesses as well, and I have their names, and they all corroborated that with the House Select Committee on Assassinations.
So is Crisman's alibi one that you buy, or do you doubt it?
No, I don't doubt it. I don't think none of the tramps look like him. I know Ken Thomas would argue with me on this, but and Ken suggests that the Frenchie one was Crisman, while others have said the old man tramp was Crisman, and some have said E. Howard Hunt was. Anyway, I don't think it was Fred Crisman. Ken would argue with me, probably.
Well, the three tramps or hobos or, like I said, intelligence figures or whatever they were, it's an interesting thing, as I think it's one of those topics that has fascinated almost every single researcher at one time or the other. I mean, we've all made guesses, but guessing alone is a bit of a folly in and of itself because it does allow those finger pointers out there to later try to discredit what were just informed guesses to begin with, because, I don't know, in this assassination world, it's one of those things it's just kind of a fun guess to make. But moving from Washington State to the Bayou, well, I find Dallas to be really an interesting local study in 1963. I find New Orleans to be even more fascinating. There was such a clash of cultures, from the intelligence establishment to the voodoo priestesses, from jazz to Cajun country music, from the far right to the far left. Throw in the Riley faction and the anti-Castro Cubans, the cancer researchers, the Birchers, all mixed in together with Mardi Gras as sort of this loud, raucous backdrop. And New Orleans 1963 is pretty enthralling. What was it about New Orleans that year, at that time and place, that was so unique?
Well, it was the cultural flashpoint was going on there in the 60s for sure. You had, part of it was the artistic community and the whole jazz background, and you had a kind of burgeoning gay community, so you really had a lot of those cultural influences that were kind of ahead of society as a whole, So it was one of those hip places to go to. It was really interesting. So it attracted artists and musicians and people who, Kerry Thornley, for instance. That's what attracted him to New Orleans. He and his pal Greg Hill lived in Orange County, and as he told it, him and Greg Hill, these guys were just out of high school, and they were out on the street one night in town where they lived at there in conservative Southern California, kind of making noise and whooping it up, and they got cop stopped and said, "You guys can't make all that noise. You're being a general disturbance." And they said, "Well, this is bullshit. Let's go somewhere where we can make noise all night long." So they went to New Orleans, and we can get into Thornley's story in a bit. But, like you said, you had all those cultural influences. Then you had it's kind of like Spook Central with a lot of the Cubans, that were involved with the CIA doing different operations. A lot of recruiting was going there, and a lot of spooks ended up there, or semi-spooks, or people who claimed to be spooks, like Gordon Novell, who I know you wanted to talk about it. So, yeah, it was just one of those places where a lot of things converge on each other.
Yes, but before we get into Gordon Novell tonight, I want to ask you about someone you've probably done more work on than anyone, Kerry Thornley. What originally piqued your interest in Thornley?
I got interested because early 90s there was a book by Jonathan Vankin called Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes, which is a very, very cool book if you can still get a hold of that. And I think it was the first chapter on the book was on Kerry Thornley, who I basically didn't know much about at that time. This was kind of during the zine period too, and I'd seen the name Kerry Thornley and actually read some of his writings, and they were kind of somewhat incomprehensible to me. There were a lot of conspiracy stuff he was throwing around and things I'd never heard before, so I wasn't really processing some of the stuff I saw written by him floating around during that period. But I came across this chapter in Vankin's book, and the basic gist of it was that this guy, Kerry Thornley, grew up in Southern California and joined the Marines and met, well, before that, that's not the first oddity. The first oddity was that he and his pal Greg Hill started this spoof religion called Discordianism in the late 50s, 57 or 58, that was dedicated to the worship of the great goddess of chaos and discord. And, it was a spoof joke between these guys at the time, but over time it grew into much, much more. But so anyway, you have that little thing going on there in the background, the beginning of the Discordian Society. And so in 59, Thornley joined the Marines, and he met Lee Harvey Oswald and got to know Oswald over like a really short period of time, a couple months, but kind of considered him maybe not a good friend, but they were definitely acquaintances. They got to know each other kind of pretty well during a short period of time, and they were kind of the outfit oddballs of the Marine unit they were in, because Thornley liked to discuss and debate everything under the sun, different politics and ideologies and different religions, and really delved deep into a lot of stuff. And he kind of moved from one thing to another for a while. He was considered himself a Marxist, but then he became got turned on to Ayn Rand and kind of became a libertarian, and continued to change like that throughout his life. So anyway, met Oswald for this short period of time, and then Oswald had just come back from Japan, and he'd got in trouble there, so he was kind of he was seen as kind of a troublemaker guy, so it kind of had that aura around him when Kerry knew him at where they were stationed in Southern California. So Thornley ends up going to serve at Atsugi, where Oswald had previously been stationed. And on his boat trip over there, Thornley started writing this book called Idle Warriors that was kind of serving in the Marines during, this Cold War period where there's a lot of malaise to be a Marine. People didn't quite, a lot of the soldiers really felt like they didn't really know what their mission was, and over in Japan they were just causing a lot of hell, and it was kind of a rowdy outfit. So Kerry was capturing that in his book, and the main character in the book, named Johnny Shelburne, was like a composite character of Thornley and other Marines he knew, including Oswald. And then while this was going on, after he got into Atsugi, he heard Oswald had defected, and at that point he changed the main character to be based entirely on Oswald. So he was writing a book about Oswald 3 years before the Kennedy assassination, which later got Jim Garrison, some people wondering, what the hell is he? Is this like a setup of Oswald to paint him as a commie? So there was that going on. So then Thornley ends up in New Orleans, and Oswald was in New Orleans during that same period. And, there's at least a couple weeks where they could have seen each other that would have overlapped during the time they were there, because Thornley, anyway, they were both coming and going. Thornley went back to California for a while in the spring of '63, and then Oswald was kind of there later in the summer, and and Thornley got back in like late August. And it was later claimed that they were seen together, and that also Thornley had some romantic liaisons with Marina Oswald. These were a lot of the allegations that Thornley was charged with. And so this came out during the Garrison investigation. Thornley was in New Orleans like till late, a few weeks after the Kennedy assassination. Then he moved to Arlington, Virginia, ended up testifying before the Warren Commission. And, so a lot of things happened to Thornley. And so, all of that happened. And then Thornley moved back to the West Coast, got into psychedelics, and was part of a free love commune, and getting into that part of his life. He kind of became an anarchist, had a lot of things going on. He was also editing a libertarian newsletter, and it was in late '67, boy, we can get into a lot of details here, but I'll cut it short, that he started communicating with Garrison, because Garrison was interested, wanted to know what he knew about Oswald, and Thornley felt after a point that he didn't like what Garrison was up to. At that point, Garrison really wasn't coming after him, but he was trying to make Kerry make some allegations against another Marine named Heindel. And so, anyway, at one point, Kerry said he didn't want to be involved with, working with Garrison at all. And then in early '68, Garrison started making these claims against him. He never indicted Thornley, but he had him picked up, subpoenaed him, and had him come and testify in New Orleans. And of course, Garrison's claim was that Thornley was part of this conspiracy based out of New Orleans with all the other characters he wove into this, and that Thornley had met with Oswald. Another claim started as this thing evolved, other witnesses came forward that, they'd seen Oswald and Thornley together, and that even some claims, like Reverend Bruce Shears, who was a pretty unreliable witness, claimed that it was Kerry who traveled to Texas and was in that photograph of Oswald. I think it was in Fort Worth, where he had the Mannlicher Carcano in one hand and the Call Me newsletter in the other hand. Brochures claimed that was Thornley, that his Oswald's head had been superimposed on him. So anyway, had all these different allegations that Thornley, that he was one of the Oswald doubles. That's a claim that came up through the Garrison investigation. And of course, Thornley denied all of this, and ultimately he was never taken to trial after the Clay Shaw acquittal. That pretty much ended the Garrison investigation there in 70 or so. But as this thing evolved, Kerry grew to suspect over the next few years that he might have been involved unwittingly in the assassination, or associated with somehow, because of some of the curious characters he met in New Orleans during that period. One who he later suspected was E. Howard Hunt in disguise. The thing that triggered him and got him thinking along these lines was the Michael Canfield, A.J. Weberman book, Coup d'Etat in America, which swings us back to the Three Tramps. And you had the Three Tramps in that book, and they had the photographic overlays with the Watergate burglars, and if you placed them on those faces, you'd see who they were suggesting the Three Tramps were what's his name, Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt, and I forget who they're. Anyway, when Kerry saw the photograph of the old man Tramp and the photograph of E. Howard Hunt, it basically triggered this memory in his mind. It looked like the dude he was talking to in New Orleans in the early 60s, who had talked about, it seemed at the time, talked about jokingly assassinating JFK, and he began to suspect that maybe they were setting him up at that time to be like an alternate patsy in the assassination if the Oswald setup went awry. So Kerry started going down a pretty deep rabbit hole where he started really delving into a lot of, you could say, paranoid conspiracies theories that at one time or another he thought, maybe he was involved unwittingly, and that he was a victim of MK Ultra. And there was some stories of Atsugi was where a lot of that testing went on, so maybe he and Oswald were involved in MK Ultra testing program with LSD and God knows what. And as it evolved over the time, Kerry ultimately began to believe that he and Oswald were both Nazi genetic breeding experiments that had been cloned to be assassins, and that Kerry's own parents at one time or another, he believed, or suspected to be spies, and just a lot of wild stuff. And and this could be attributed, a lot of this, to he was diagnosed later on in the 70s as a paranoid schizophrenic. And so that's kind of the story of Kerry Thornley. I mean, there's a lot to it besides that. I just gave you a kind of a thumbnail sketch. And, they can argue, some people argue that, he was involved in the assassination. I'm dubious, but, there's a lot of details you can get into, and I have a couple books on Thornley, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, and Caught in the Crossfire, I'm forgetting the subtitle of this. Kerry, Thornley, Lee Oswald, and the Garrison Investigation, something like that.
Yes, actually, I have it right here. It's Caught in the Crossfire, Kerry, Thornley, Lee Oswald, and the Garrison Investigation. So that is the right title. Now, Thornley also brought E. Howard Hunt into this story, saying he was some mysterious man feeding him information, and he even supposedly predicted the rise of Charles Manson to Thornley. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, but the thing is, like I said, is conspiracy, what would you call it? Conspiracy cosmology evolved over the years. And so in some of the original material, and I ended up with a lot of the Discordian archives that Greg Hill had, and a lot of JFK materials, and you can see the evolution of Thornley's writing, because he started capturing these memories about New Orleans and Oswald, like in the early 70s, because he wanted to get this stuff documented, because he was beginning to believe that there had been a conspiracy and that he was unwittingly brought into this conspiracy. And so as the years progressed and he became, these conspiracies became more involved, maybe he went deeper down the rabbit hole of having some mental issues, which is, partly true. Other writings came out, and I think the thing where he said brother-in-law, who was the E. Howard Hunt character, brought in Charles Manson, and that they were part of some greater conspiracy. That came along later in the years, and I don't know how much stock I put in at that point, or how much you can rely on Thornley's memories.
Now, Adam, we don't always take requests on this show, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, by request, about Gordon Novell. Now, it was our good mutual friend, you know him well, Rob Clark, the lone gunman himself, a frequent guest host on this show, who said, you have to ask Adam about Gordon Novell. You have to ask Adam about Gordon Novell. So, of course, when Rob asks, I'm there. And it's interesting, actually, because I was just having a discussion the other day about Novell with someone else. So this is rather timely. So please tell us about the controversial case and character of Gordon Novell.
Yeah, I think Rob meant to ask me when we did our interview, but we ran out of time. I probably know enough about Gordon Novell to be dangerous, but I don't know all that much. But he comes into the story. Let me think about this chronologically. Kerry Thornley. Thornley had all these connections with a lot of these characters who were associated with the Kennedy assassination or tangentially involved, And one of them was Gordon Novell. And basically what that was, they both attended the University of Southern California back in, must have been 1958, and he knew him, Novell, back then as Gordy. But there's not that much there. Who knows how much they knew each other? When the Garrison investigation got hot and heavy, Novell became a big name. Originally, he was working with the Garrison investigation, and then he had got on the outs with Garrison, became a suspect in his case, and it might have been that Thornley heard Novell, and he goes, "Oh, what the hell? He's involved in this? We were at USC together." So Novell, from what I know of him, he was a bit of a raconteur type. I vaguely recall he had something he was doing at the World's Fair in 1964 and had different things going on in New Orleans, and it was said that he was some kind of had expertise and had a business in electronics and surveillance and this type of stuff, and that's how he, as I have heard, got involved with the Garrison investigation, because Garrison brought him on to be like security to basically look around. I guess Garrison felt might have been becoming paranoid that the CIA or whoever was bugging him, so it was Novell's job to, I guess, sniff out any eavesdropping, bugging devices, and who knows, provide what other kind of security. It's not clear, but Novell at some point got busted taking photographs of the office they were working out of, and either sold them to NBC, National Broadcasting Corporation, or whatever. They got a hold of them somehow, either sold them or something. And when Garrison found out about that, he got pissed and began to suspect that Novell was some type of spy, CIA spy, who knows. And then Novell split, and Garrison subpoenaed him, and he was going to file charges on him. I forget what the specific crimes were, but then all of a sudden, kind of like the same thing with Thornley, they had a falling out, and one day they were working with Garrison, and the next day they were suspects in the case. Now, boy, I don't remember all the particular details, but there was an episode where Novell was involved with some anti-Castro Cubans, and this was in 61 or so, and it had to do with an arsenal of weapons that were ripped off from some type of facility, and it was kind of a deal back then, and Novell was associated with that, so you kind of lump him into perhaps he was involved in out of the anti-Castro groups that were around there doing paramilitary training, maybe kind of sort. It's not really clear. At one time or another, during that Garrison investigation, in a newspaper article, Novell claimed that he was a CIA. Of course, the CIA denied that, and a lot of cases they're going to deny it whether it's true or false, and that's the thing. It's like Thomas Beckham and other people who claim they're CIA agents. Well, you don't really know for sure. They were contract agents. Actually, the CIA. There was a few that during the Garrison investigation, I think it went through. I'm not sure how these were generated, but the CIA basically there's some files you can find in some of the assassination materials where they went through some of these characters like Kerry Thornley, and they gave a little background and basically said he was never involved with the CIA, and they kind of did the same thing with Novell. Who knows? And so that's kind of with the what I know. Of course, he's been claimed to have been the Umbrella Man, right?
Yeah, I remember a few people talking about him potentially being the Umbrella Man, but then there were also the stories that he had a few meetings with Jack Ruby.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then there's the Jack Anderson reports.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, where he says that Chuck Colson asked Novell to create this sort of degausser gun that erases tapes.
Right. Yeah, with the Watergate tapes.
And so, yes, the Watergate tapes. Just fascinating stuff.
With Novell, it's hard to tell where, the truth ends and this legend he kind of created around himself, how much of that is really true, how much he was just embellishing to kind of create this spooky aura as some kind of James Bond type of character. It's hard to say. Yeah, even with that Watergate claim, I've never really looked too deeply into that to really, tell if it's true, but if Jack Anderson was reporting on it, yeah, there might be something to that. And he did have the background in electronics, so yeah, that could very well be true. I had one thing, if you've never heard it, you should look for the David Emery episode with Gordon Novell. Have you ever heard that?
No, I've never heard that.
Oh, I'll send it to you. It could be one of your classic episodes. I was looking through your archives there.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely do that.
So this was probably 84, and Emery's doing his show. You know, it's going out over whatever it was, AM, FM radio. And he's doing a Mae Brussel thing where he's, you know, laying out a JFK assassination conspiracy, and he starts getting into Gordon Novell was this or that, blah, blah, blah. And, okay, we got a phone call coming in from here, and it ends up being Gordon Novell, who was driving along somewhere in, like, Central California and heard this and had to call in and get on Emery's shit, you know, tell him, you know, this is bull crap what you're saying. Here's the facts of it. And Emery's like, whoa, what I get involved with here? And damn, Gordon Novell's talking to me. I'll send that to you. Now, I had a Gordon Novell sighting, and let's see, this. Well, I didn't actually meet him. It was 2007 at the Roswell conference. That was like what was that, 60th anniversary? And I was hanging out with Nick Redfern, if you know him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so we were both presenting at that, presenters at that. So we had like a table and the vendors thing. We were sharing that, just hanging out. And he goes, "Oh, that's Gordon Novell." And I go, "What?" "Yeah." I go, "What the fuck's he doing here?" He said, "Oh, he's involved with this group in Las Vegas that are back engineering alien craft or something." So I was like, whoa. I was too spooked to talk to him or anything, you know, so whatever. And as it turns out, he got involved with Robert Bigelow for a while. You know who he is, right?
Oh, yes,
okay,
I do.
Yeah, you're kind of in the UFO scene. And I think he approached, when Bob Lazar was saying that he had worked on, you know, when he emerged and was working on back-engineered craft, Novell wanted to get involved with that himself, so he was rubbing elbows with those guys, Bigelow, whatnot, and he was also involved with a certain metal alloy substance they had at that time, rumored to be from an alien craft, or they were trying to figure out if it was and how they could use that. So, and what's funny is this material is still floating around, and what I think it is Art's parts that emerged, you know, from the Art Bell show.
I remember very well.
Yeah, and those got passed along to Dick Bigelow, got some samples, and Linda Moulton Howe, and I think it's the same stuff that the To the Stars Academies are still looking at here 20 years later. They haven't figured out what this shit is, but because they said they got it from Linda Moulton Howe. So anyway, all these things seem to connect. What else do I know about Novell? So he was doing that stuff, and I'm working on I've just finished the book, submitted to the publisher, called Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius. And it deals with a lot of the Benowitz, Doty, MJ12, Dulce Base mythos. And one of my sources for this book is a guy named Tal Levesque. I don't know if you ever heard his name.
No, him I don't know.
Anyway, he was involved with a lot of that Las Vegas nexus of researchers, John Lear and others who, like, were the first that brought out these dulce based materials and whatnot, and they were interacting with Novell a bit during that period, and I guess him and Tal was telling me he and Novell got crossways for a while. They were both bugging each other, eavesdropping, and they're who knows why they got pissed off at each other and threatening each other's lives, and eventually they figured it out and became, maybe not friends, but got along okay. But it was Levesque who made the claim to me, and this is just more wild rumor, legend. I really doubt if there's anything to it, but that it was Gordon Novell who had assassinated Mae Brussel.
What?
Yeah, and that he had stuck a needle in her chair at her home, and she sat on that, and it had the fast-acting cancer.
I've never heard that.
I don't. Yeah, that's been floating around too. And Tal Levesque passed away about a year ago. He always told me, "Don't share that with anybody." And so.
Well, now, I must ask you about Bob Lazar. I think longtime listeners to this show know that this is one of my addictions. So here we go. Now, we've had John Lear on the show twice. We're hoping to have him on again very soon. And he went into some detail with us in his first appearance about his remembrances of what I call the Year of Lazar.
Yeah.
But what do you think about Lazar's claims? What's your take?
I get pretty deep into the subject in this book I'm talking about here. Oh boy, just Bob Lazar in general.
Yes, the idea that Bob Lazar worked at S4, sort of an outlet of Area 51, and was back engineering alien craft.
Well, no. Now he might have believed he was. Of course, I don't know for sure any of this, but. One read of that was that it was an intelligence operation, and a lot of that was going on during that period, and I lay that out in the book. There was a lot of these stories all overlap that came out of this period with Area 51, Dulce Base. It all tied into the MJ-12 stories, Doty, Benowitz, and part of the bigger picture was creating disinformation about the craft that were being seen, but also, spreading rumors about what they were seeing, setting up sightings, and that might have been the case with Lazar, that he was tipped off. And John Lear, he'd been involved with Area 51 for a couple of years to that point, that they were told, Lazar was, or whoever, that you go out to this point at this time and you're going to see something. Now, whether it's funny, all these what people are thinking are extraterrestrial crafts are always seen over these sites where they're experimenting with the, especially during that period, was really the heyday of, maybe the heyday is going on, but with a lot of the stealth crap that was being developed in that time. And so there was a lot of layers to these type of intelligence operation. There was, proven that, Doty was running a operation involved with other people to kind of muddy the waters of sightings that had been seen at Kirtland Air Force Base, but and so Area 51 kind of fit the same model of part of it was finding out, taking reports of these sightings and photographs and video footage and putting this out into the UFO community and trying to flush moles from holes. That's what Falcon told Bill Moore. It was designed to flush moles from holes, and what it was looking for Soviets or Chinese, and there was a lot that were involved in UFO research who were approaching these different UFO organizations, MUFON and APRO. And within these organizations, you had a lot of people who worked in contractors for civilian defense. I mean, a lot of the key players back then were also involved developing the space shuttle and worked on the stealth program, you know. So the reason these different spies were approaching these organizations because you had all these civilian contractors who were also trying to figure out, I mean, some of these guys like, what was his name, Lee Graham, and was working on the stealth program making parts, but he didn't know what the craft looked like himself, you know. So that's a lot of the stuff that was going on there. And a lot of the times, you know, if there was a certain UFO report that the intelligence community knew was like really a report of experimental aircraft, one way to find out to kind of bring in the spies and find out how much they knew, what they would say about these reports and not, you know, that was part of the whole operation, this gathering information. So I think that might have been what the Lazar thing was about. Now, as far as him going to S4, did he make that up? I'm not sure. You know, a lot.
At this point in the show, I lost contact with Adam. There was a lot of static on our lines, so I had to call him back. So we have him here now, and I'm just going to have him continue his answer on Bob Lazar.
We were talking about some type of intelligence operation, which is one possible answer. Now, a lot of people felt that he was like sincere in how he described what he saw, and he was kind of down to earth. And he also, at one time or another, felt that it had been staged. He shared that as well, what he saw at S4 Area 51. And even like there was one incident I remember where one of his co-workers took him down a long hall and pointed through like a window that had a screen over it, and it looked like the back of an alien's head or something. That was one of the things, and he later said, well, he didn't know for sure what it was. It could have been a doll for all he knew, and that he did, you know, say that, stress that, well, maybe this could have been staged for me, you know, but he did work on all these different crafts there. There was like several variations of the saucers, but he also made the claim that there was a female doctor there and a nurse that he would go in to see, and they would hypnotize him upon occasion. And it was hypnotizing other people there, you know. So it's all kind of odd. It has that kind of MK Ultra, My Labs weirdness around it too. And some of the stories too. There's a playbook, you know, that you see with a lot of the different stories, Area 51, Dulce, whatever, that they're given a briefing. There's a briefing book. You've heard this in different cases, and Lazar got a briefing book about an altercation that happened there at Area 51, where there was a joint base with the, you know, it's like the secret treaty out of MJ-12, where the military was working with the aliens, and there was some confrontation and a firefight, and it's, you know, basically the same story that came out of Dulce too. So kind of a bit of a playbook. I suspect that they were using a lot of the same stories over and over again to push these memes. So I really don't know about Lazar. I doubt that he was working on actual extraterrestrial craft. I guess it could be possible, but I think once again, when he and Lazar or he and Lear and Huff and whoever, they were tipped off to something that was going down there, and that was something that whoever was coordinating those flights or whatever was going on wanted people to see and talk about.
Right. Well, for anyone out there who wants to know what I think is wants to hear actually what I think is the best retelling of John Lear's Year of Lazar, please go to the Midnight Rider News Show archives, midnightridernews.com, and please listen to episode 011. That's episode 11, which is our first appearance with John Lear. He's been on the show twice, but that first appearance is amazing. You will not be disappointed at all. I promise you that. So we can't really get into all of your work on the Manson case tonight. It's vast as well, and we'd be here 4 hours if we did that. And frankly, I just don't want to do that to you. But it's another topic for another show. However, I do want to ask you this. There seems to be, what I've noticed, a lot of breakaway ideologies now, breakaway groups, sort of tired of what is mainstream. Was the Manson case, the family, Tate LaBianca, was all of that a product of its time, or could we see something very similar happening today?
Well, I mean, yes, it was a product of its time because I think it was part of it. You didn't have the wall-to-wall media, information cycle, and really didn't have that much news stories, that got that type of attention that the Manson murders did, at that time, because it was part of it was just celebrity murders, and it was like the hippies or that later got into it, and so I think it was just confluence of things there, it was just a story where these brutal murders and of the Hollywood starlet, and there was rumors of drugs and on and on and on. It was and it was it was kind of the end of a generation, the innocence of the 60s generation. So it had all those elements to it, and it got a lot of media coverage, I think, which really propelled it into such a big story that's lived on over these decades. And I'm familiar with, I know that, obviously I'm aware of the Chaos book. I've been for so many years involved in the subject, that over at a certain point I got pretty burned out and interested in other things. But I remember this O'Neill guy from back when I was originally researching the Manson book. He was looking into stuff way back then, 20 years ago. And I hear he, I touched on a lot of the stuff that having to do with the Manson family possibly being a military mind control experiment or involved with the mafia or who knows, that's what originally attracted me to the story. And I guess O'Neill has dug a little deeper into the possibility that it was some type of intelligence operation. Is that correct?
Well, his book is sort of two books in one. One is just a scathing rebuke of Vincent Bugliosi, which I think everyone enjoys. Everyone who knows Bugliosi's bad work over the years, both on Manson and JFK and other things. But the second part is he sort of comes at it like, well, here's everything I found. Here's the evidence. Here's the documents. But I'm not so sure what it means. I have a few educated guesses, but in the end, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So he kind of does that, which I kind of respect in a way, actually.
That's usually how my books end. I remember giving a presentation one time on the Prankster and the Conspiracy, Kerry Thornley book. And yeah, somebody posed the question, okay, well, who did the JFK assassination? I said, I threw up my arms. I don't know, man. Could have been any number. And I knew the guy was I got to know him a little better after time, but he didn't like that answer at all. It's like, you're writing a book that deals with, among other things, the JFK assassination. You ought to be able to say who you think was, I don't know, man. When I first started looking into it way back when, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, it must have been I'm in the CIA camp, but then I looked at other things, and well, it could have been this, could have been, I have no clue now.
Well, I've always found it to be sort of a swerve in argument when people demand of us to tell them where the shots come from or who's responsible for the JFK assassination. I mean, I can tell you what didn't happen. Yeah. I can tell you it was not Oswald. It wasn't Oswald acting alone. It wasn't Oswald from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. To tell you those things, I don't have to tell you who it was or where they shot from. You can always just say, well, the jury is still out, because it is. But the question is how it actually changed society and how it changes the way we look at government. Or you have the John Judge answer. When they asked John Judge, from where did the shots come, he would always say, well, the Pentagon, which I think is a pretty good answer too. So we're with Adam Gorightly, author of many books, overall interesting guy. And I want to give you a chance right now to tell everyone where they can find you online and where they can read your books.
Well, since I'm plugging, I might as well give out all the website addresses and stuff, because you can read a lot of stuff online. Besides the book, I got different blogs and whatnot. Boy, where to start? Sometimes I forget all the different blogs and crap I have. There's Untamed Dimensions. That's one blog. You can just search Untamed Dimensions. I did a podcast for a few years, and you can find some of those episodes online at like Podomatic, Untamed Dimensions. And I have a website called Historia Discordia, which is about the Kerry Thornley and Greg Hill and the Discordian Society, but there's a lot of JFK stuff there as well, dealing with Thornley and the Garrison investigation. So that's historiadiscordia.com. I also have another blog I started about a year ago or so it's called Chasing UFOs and Other Passing Obsessions. And so there's that one where I'm posting kind of UFO stuff and like samples from this book Greg Bishop and I published about a year ago. A is for Adamski. So there's different blogs. There's a website, adamgorightly.com. As far as the books, you can find them all on Amazon. Historia Discordia and Prankster and the Conspiracy and Caught in the Crossfire, and of course the Manson book, Shadow over Santa Susana. And just go to Amazon and plug in Adam Gorightly, and you'll find about 8 or 9 books.
And I'd like to thank Adam Gorightly for being on the show. It's been a long time trying to find him and corral him into this. And man, I really just want to thank you so much. And I've read you for many years, and I've listened to a lot of things that you've been on, including Rob Clark's Lone Gunman show recently. Great episode. Everyone should check that out. But thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's been fun, man.
We're going to absolutely have to get back together someday and do this show again, maybe on ufology or something else. But it was a lot of fun, so let's do it again.
Oh, most certainly. Yeah. I think I can do that.
And this has been author Adam Gorightly. Thank you very much. I'm St. Patrick. This is the Midnight Rider News Show, and I want to get this posted ASAP. So, from the other side of the mountain, on the best side of midnight, I wish you peace.